Get that plate out of my sight, and tell me why a woman carrying dirty glasses noticed what 12 famous chefs couldn't." The sentence fell from Dominic Moretti's mouth so quietly that every conversation inside the private Manhattan dining room died at once. Dominic was 38, a feared mafia boss whose name could empty a nightclub faster than a fire alarm. Yet tonight he sat alone at the head of a 20-foot walnut table, surrounded by food worth more than most people's monthly rent. Truffle risotto cooled beneath silver covers. Wagyu steak sat untouched. A French chef with 3 Michelin stars stood pale beside the kitchen doors, waiting for approval that never came. For 6 months, Dominic had hired celebrated chefs from New York, Chicago, Miami, even flown one in from California, but nothing tasted right anymore. His men blamed impossible standards. Dominic knew better. Since his mother died 2 years earlier, every meal had become another reminder that his enormous penthouse could be filled with people and still feel painfully empty. Across the room, Elena Brooks tightened both hands around a tray before anyone noticed them shaking. At 29, Elena was a curvy waitress working double shifts at Bellucci's private dining club, sending most of her paycheck toward rent, overdue medical bills for her father, and the tiny emergency fund she kept pretending was growing. She had learned how to smile through whispers about her size, how to ignore customers who looked past her as if expensive clothes determined human worth, and how to swallow humiliation because losing this job meant losing the apartment she shared with her father in Queens. Tonight, however, ignoring people became impossible. "Careful, Elena," Vanessa, the floor manager, muttered as Elena passed. Her eyes swept over Elena's black uniform with open disapproval. These guests expect elegance. Try not to draw attention. Elena's cheeks warmed, but she kept walking. She had heard versions of that sentence her whole life. Too big for the dress, too ordinary for the room, too much of the wrong thing, never enough of the right one. She placed fresh water beside Dominic without meeting his eyes, but as she turned away, she caught the scent rising from his untouched bowl. Rosemary, black pepper, burned garlic. Elena stopped. She knew that smell. Her late mother had taught her to cook before life became hospital bills and late-night shifts, and one rule had been carved into her memory: never let bitterness hide beneath expensive ingredients. "Why did you stop?" Dominic asked. His voice was calm, but 2 bodyguards immediately looked toward her. Elena swallowed. "I didn't, sir." "You did." He leaned back, studying her with dark, unreadable eyes. "You smelled the food." The chef gave a nervous laugh. "Mr. Moretti, she's a waitress." Elena lowered her gaze, ready to apologize, until Dominic's attention shifted to the chef. "I didn't ask what she does." Silence. Elena looked up. It was the first time that evening anyone had corrected someone for dismissing her. Dominic turned back to her. "What's wrong with it?" Vanessa appeared instantly. "Mr. Moretti, I'm terribly sorry. Elena has no authority to comment on." "Her name," Dominic interrupted, "is Elena. Use it." Elena stared at him. Men like Dominic Moretti were supposed to frighten people, and, judging by the frozen faces around the table, he did. Yet when he spoke to her, his voice lowered instead of sharpened. "Tell me." Elena looked at the bowl again. Every instinct told her to stay invisible. Then she remembered the rent notice folded inside her purse, her father pretending he wasn't worried, and every room where she had made herself smaller so other people could feel bigger. She lifted her chin. The garlic was cooked too long. The rosemary went in too early, and the stock tastes like it was reduced twice. You're not tasting the beef anymore. You're tasting bitterness. The celebrity chef's face flushed. "That is ridiculous." Dominic picked up his spoon. He tasted the dish once, then looked toward the kitchen. "Bring me fresh garlic, rosemary, beef stock, butter, and a clean pan." Vanessa blinked. "Sir?" Dominic never looked away from Elena. "She's going to show us." A few guests laughed. Someone whispered that the curvy waitress would embarrass herself in front of New York's most dangerous man. Elena's heart pounded, but Dominic rose from his chair and stepped beside her, close enough that the laughter vanished. "You can say no," he told her softly. That choice surprised her more than the command. Elena glanced toward the kitchen, then back at the lonely man who had rejected every chef in the city. "I'll do it." For the first time all night, Dominic Moretti smiled. But when Elena reached for the pan, he noticed the faded burn scar across her wrist, and the expression disappeared from his face. Elena expected Dominic Moretti to ask about the scar, but instead he looked at the clean pan in front of her and said, "Cook." The kitchen at Bellucci's had never been so quiet. 12 chefs, 3 servers, Vanessa, and 2 of Dominic's bodyguards stood watching as Elena tied an apron around her curvy waist and tried to ignore the heat rising into her face. She wasn't trained in Paris. She had never worked in a famous kitchen. Most nights, her job was carrying plates made by people who barely remembered her name. But once the butter touched the pan, her hands stopped shaking. She browned the beef gently, crushed fresh garlic with the flat of a knife, added it only after lowering the heat, then dropped in rosemary during the final minute instead of letting it burn. She loosened the browned bits with fresh stock, tasted the sauce, added salt, and frowned. "Honey?" she said. The celebrity chef scoffed. "Honey?" Elena ignored him. Half a teaspoon, maybe less. One kitchen assistant handed it over. Elena stirred, tasted again, then plated the beef with nothing decorative except a spoonful of sauce and roasted potatoes she found warming near the oven. "That's it," Vanessa whispered, almost embarrassed for her. Elena placed the plate in front of Dominic. "That's it." Dominic sat down. Everyone watched him cut one piece. He chewed slowly. His expression didn't change. Elena's stomach dropped. She had just gambled the job keeping her father's lights on because a dangerous stranger had asked her to trust instincts she hadn't used in years. Then Dominic took a second bite, and a third. The room changed. One of his bodyguards, a broad-shouldered man named Marco, stared as if he had witnessed something impossible. Dominic had barely finished half a meal in months. Tonight, he kept eating. "Where did you learn this?" he asked. "My mother." Elena folded her hands tightly. "She ran a little diner when I was a kid. Nothing fancy." Dominic stopped with his fork halfway to the plate. "What was it called?" "Brooks Family Kitchen. In Astoria. It closed years ago." Something flickered across his face so quickly Elena almost missed it. Dominic put down his fork. Everyone out. No one moved. He looked toward the doorway. "Now." Chairs scraped against the floor. Kitchen staff disappeared. Even the celebrity chef started toward the hall, furious and humiliated, but Dominic's voice stopped him. "Not you." The chef turned. Dominic slid the untouched original dish toward him. "You laughed at her before she touched the pan." "Mr. Moretti, I was only—" "You were certain status made you smarter." Dominic stood, buttoning his black jacket. It didn't. He looked at Bellucci's owner, who had rushed in after hearing the commotion. "Your contract for my private events is cancelled. I don't pay people to insult talent because it arrives wearing a waitress uniform." Elena's eyes widened. "Mr. Moretti, you don't have to do that because of me." His gaze moved to her. "I didn't." His voice softened. "I did it because he failed twice. First with the food, then with you." Vanessa lowered her eyes, suddenly fascinated by the floor. Dominic noticed. "And if Elena works another shift here, nobody comments on her body, her clothes, or whether she belongs in the room. Is that understood?" "Yes, Mr. Moretti," the owner answered immediately. Elena felt something unfamiliar tighten in her chest. She had defended herself before. She had survived insults before, but no one with power had ever heard disrespect aimed at her and treated it like it mattered. "Why?" she asked after everyone left. Dominic studied her across the warm kitchen lights. "Why what? Why are you doing this?" He glanced at the half-finished plate. "Because you gave me something nobody in this city has managed to give me in 2 years." Elena looked at the food. "Dinner? A reason to want another bite." The loneliness beneath his answer was so exposed that she almost forgot who he was. Then she saw his attention fall again to the faded scar on her wrist. "That burn," he said quietly. Elena immediately pulled down her sleeve. "Old accident." Dominic didn't push. Instead, he surprised her by taking one step back, giving her space. "I need a personal cook 3 nights a week." Elena almost laughed. "I'm a waitress. Tonight everyone learned that isn't all you are." He placed a business card beside her hand. The salary written on the back made her blink twice. It was more than she earned in a month. "I can't accept charity." "Good," Dominic said. "I don't offer it." Before Elena could answer, Marco entered carrying a small leather folder. His expression was unusually serious. "Boss, you asked me to check the diner name." Dominic opened the folder, read one line, and went completely still. Elena's pulse quickened. "What is it?" Dominic raised his eyes to her, and for the first time that night, the feared Mafia Boss looked genuinely shaken. "Your mother's diner," he said. "I've been there before." Elena frowned. "When?" Dominic closed the folder slowly. "The night someone saved my life." Elena stared at Dominic as if the kitchen floor had shifted beneath her. "Saved your life?" she repeated. Dominic looked down at the leather folder in Marco's hands, then back at her. 14 years ago I was 24. My father was still alive, and I had enemies I didn't understand yet. Elena's brow tightened. "My mother never mentioned you. She wouldn't have known my name." Dominic's voice became quieter. "I was bleeding. She let me into the diner after closing, left cleaned the cut on my side, fed me, and called a doctor she trusted instead of the police." Elena's lips parted. She could almost see her mother doing exactly that. Ruth Brooks had been the kind of woman who would give soup to someone dangerous before asking why he needed it. "Why didn't you ever go back?" she asked. Something hardened behind Dominic's eyes. "Because the next morning, the man who attacked me disappeared. My father moved me out of New York for 6 months. When I returned, the diner was gone." Elena looked away. "My mother got sick. We lost everything fast." Dominic's jaw tightened, but he didn't offer pity. He seemed to understand she would hate that. Instead, he slid the business card closer. "Then come cook for me." Elena gave a small, exhausted laugh. "You make everything sound like an order." "It usually is." For the first time, she caught the faintest trace of humor in his face. Then her phone vibrated inside her apron. One glance at the screen erased it from hers. Unknown number. She turned the phone over. Dominic noticed. "Problem? Spam." The phone vibrated again. This time a message appeared across the screen before she could hide it. "You have until Friday. Pay what your father owes, or we collect another way." Elena's fingers went cold. Dominic read only enough to understand the threat before she locked the screen. "Who sent that?" "Nobody." His eyes sharpened. "Elena, I said I can handle it." "That wasn't my question." The warmth between them vanished under the sudden pressure in the room. Elena grabbed her tray. "My father borrowed money after my mother died. Medical bills, rent, bad decisions made when people are desperate. I've been paying it down." Dominic's expression became still in the dangerous way that made everyone else at Bellucci's avoid looking at him. "To whom?" "A man named Victor Hale." Marco swore under his breath. Dominic turned toward him. "You know him?" "He runs collections for Salvatore Rizzo." The name changed the air. Elena didn't know enough about Dominic's world to understand immediately, but she understood the look exchanged between the two men. "Who is Salvatore Rizzo?" she asked. Dominic answered without looking away from Marco. "A rival who has spent the last year trying to find a weakness in my organization." Elena frowned. "My father's debt has nothing to do with you." Dominic's gaze returned to her. Maybe it didn't yesterday. Before he could say more, Bellucci's front doors crashed open. Vanessa appeared in the kitchen entrance, pale and breathless. "Elena, there are men asking for you." Dominic moved before Elena could react. He stepped between her and the doorway, his body blocking her completely. "How many?" Marco asked. "3." Dominic removed his watch, handed it to Marco, then looked at Elena. "Stay behind me. I don't need you fighting my battles." "Good," he said calmly, "because this one just became mine." They entered the dining room together. 3 men in dark coats waited near the bar. The tallest smiled when he saw Elena. "There she is." Dominic stopped several feet in front of her. "You wanted Miss Brooks?" The man's smile faded when he recognized him. "Moretti." Elena felt Dominic's hand move backward without touching her, a silent barrier telling her not to step forward. The collector recovered quickly. "This is private business." "Then speak carefully." "Her father owes 60,000. Elena's stomach dropped. "That's impossible. It was 28. The man looked past Dominic and smiled directly at her. "Interest." Dominic's voice went flat. "Illegal interest." "Depends who's asking." Dominic took one slow step closer. Nobody else moved. "I'm asking." The collector swallowed, but then reached inside his coat and pulled out an envelope instead of a weapon. "Rizzo said you'd get involved." Dominic froze. The man tossed the envelope onto a table. "He also said to give you this when you did." Marco opened it first. Inside were photographs of Elena leaving work, Elena buying groceries, Elena helping her father into a taxi, and one taken that very evening through Bellucci's front window. Someone had been watching her for days. Elena's face drained of colour. Dominic picked up the final photograph. On the back, one sentence had been written in black ink. The girl isn't the debt. She's the message. Dominic looked up, every trace of softness gone. "Get Elena out of here!" But Elena didn't move. She was staring at one of the photographs, her breathing suddenly shallow. "Dominic," he turned. She pointed to the blurred figure reflected in the window behind her. "That man." Dominic followed her finger. "What about him?" Elena looked at him, terrified. "He was at my mother's funeral." Dominic's eyes snapped back to the photograph. "You're certain?" Elena nodded, though her hands had begun to tremble. "He stood across the street during the funeral. Grey coat, silver ring. I remember because he never came inside, and when everyone left, he was still watching me." Marco took the photograph and moved beneath the brighter light over the bar. "Boss," his voice changed. Dominic followed his stare to the blurred man's hand. Even through the grainy image, the ring was visible, a black stone surrounded by a silver serpent. Dominic's face went cold. "That isn't Rizzo's symbol." "No," Marco said. "It belonged to your father's inner circle." Elena looked between them. "What does that mean?" Dominic didn't answer immediately. Outside Bellucci's windows, rain streaked across Manhattan, turning passing headlights into smears of white and gold. The three collectors had already been escorted away, but suddenly the restaurant felt less safe than before. Dominic faced Marco. "Pull every record connected to Ruth Brooks. Hospital payments, property transfers, the diner, everything from 14 years ago until her death." Then he turned to Elena. "You're coming with me?" "No." Dominic stopped. Elena lifted her chin despite the fear in her eyes. "I have a father waiting at home. I'm not disappearing because some men decided I'm useful for hurting you. They've been photographing your apartment. Then help me protect my father. Don't order me away from him." For several seconds, the feared Mafia Boss simply stared at her. Men twice Elena's size rarely challenged Dominic Moretti, but instead of anger, something softer entered his expression. "You're right." He pulled out his phone. "Marco, send 2 men to her father. Quietly. He doesn't leave their sight." Elena exhaled, surprised that Dominic had listened instead of demanding obedience. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." 20 minutes later, they were inside Dominic's armoured SUV heading toward his penthouse, Elena sitting beside him rather than behind him. The city moved beyond the tinted windows while Marco worked from the front seat. Then his tablet chimed. "I found the diner." Dominic leaned forward. "What?" "Brooks' family kitchen didn't simply close because of medical debt. The building was purchased through a shell company 3 weeks after you were attacked." Elena frowned. "My mother told me the landlord forced us out." "Who owned the shell company?" Dominic asked. Marco hesitated. "Moretti Holdings." Silence filled the vehicle. Elena slowly turned toward Dominic. "Your family bought my mother's diner?" "Not me, but someone using your name did." Dominic's jaw tightened. Marco kept scrolling. "There's more. Ruth received monthly payments afterward. Like small amounts, always cash deposits below reporting thresholds." Elena's face changed. "My mother never had money. We struggled for years." "Then she wasn't keeping it," Dominic said. Marco opened another record. "She wasn't. Every deposit was transferred within 24 hours to the same private medical fund." Elena leaned closer. The name on the account made her stop breathing. "Daniel Moretti." Dominic went completely still. Elena looked at him. "Who's Daniel?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "My younger brother." Elena waited. Dominic's eyes remained fixed on the screen. "He died when I was 26. Marco's expression darkened, officially from complications after a car accident. Dominic finally looked at Elena. "But my father always believed someone inside the family tampered with his medication." Another file appeared. Ruth Brooks had been listed as an anonymous witness in an internal hospital inquiry. Elena covered her mouth. "My mother knew something." "Yes," Dominic said, "and someone paid to make sure she stayed quiet." Elena shook her head. "No, you don't understand her. If she took money, there was a reason." Dominic studied the transfer records again, then pointed to the medical fund. There was. Marco enlarged the details. Every dollar Ruth received had been redirected to families who couldn't afford treatment at the same hospital. Elena's eyes filled. Even under pressure, her mother had kept helping strangers. Dominic saw the tears before she could turn away. He didn't touch her immediately. Instead, he removed his coat and gently placed it around her shoulders, giving her the choice to pull it closer. She wasn't bought, he said. Elena swallowed hard. Then why was she afraid? The SUV suddenly slowed. Marco's phone rang. He answered, listened for 3 seconds, then looked back. "Boss, someone broke into Elena's apartment." Elena shot upright. "My father? He's safe." "Our men reached him first." She closed her eyes in relief, but Marco wasn't finished. They weren't looking for money. The place was torn apart, but only one thing is missing. Elena's voice shook. "What?" Marco held up a photo sent by the security team, an empty space behind a loose kitchen cabinet where an old metal recipe box had been hidden. Elena stared at it. "That belonged to my mother." Dominic's expression hardened. What was inside? Elena slowly looked at him. "Recipes, old letters, and a small cassette tape she made me promise never to play unless someone came looking for her." Dominic went silent. Then Marco's tablet lit up with an incoming video message. The screen showed Salvatore Rizzo holding Elena's battered recipe box. He smiled into the camera and placed the cassette beside it. "Midnight tomorrow, Moretti. Come alone, or the truth about your brother disappears forever." Dominic's eyes turned lethal, but Elena reached for the tablet first. "No," she said, fear giving way to something stronger. "If that tape belonged to my mother, I'm going with you." "You're not going anywhere near Rizzo," Dominic said, but Elena didn't flinch. They stood inside his penthouse war room 23 hours later, Manhattan glowing beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, while a digital clock on the wall counted down toward midnight. 11:17 p.m. Marco and 4 trusted men surrounded a table covered with maps, photographs, and security feeds. Dominic had spent the day tracing Salvatore Rizzo's message to an abandoned produce warehouse near the Hudson River, but every plan he proposed ended the same way. Elena stayed behind. "That tape belonged to my mother," she said, "and whatever she recorded may explain what happened to your brother. I'm not hiding while everyone else risks their lives for something my family protected." Dominic stepped closer, his black suit jacket open, tension visible in the set of his shoulders. "This isn't courage if it gets you killed. And protection isn't protection if you never let me choose." The room went silent. Dominic stared at her, and something shifted in his expression. Control had kept him alive for years. Elena was asking him to do something harder, trust her. Finally, he picked up a small communication earpiece and placed it in her palm. "You stay beside me." "Agreed. If I say move, you move." Elena raised an eyebrow. "We'll negotiate that part." Marco almost smiled. Dominic didn't, but his thumb brushed gently across Elena's knuckles before he stepped away. At 11:51, their SUV stopped 2 blocks from the warehouse. Rain had returned, tapping against the windshield. Dominic and Elena entered through the loading entrance together, his body half a step ahead of hers, close enough to shield her without hiding her. Inside, one hanging light illuminated Rizzo beside a folding table. Elena's metal recipe box sat on it. So did the cassette. "You brought her," Rizzo said. Dominic's voice was ice. "You asked for me." "I asked for the weakness you've suddenly developed." Elena felt Dominic tense. Rizzo smiled at her. "Do you really think he cares about a waitress? Men like Moretti collect things, buildings, loyalty, women who make them feel human for a few weeks." Elena's old humiliation rose automatically, the instinct to shrink, to wonder whether everyone else saw something she didn't. Then Dominic moved, not toward Rizzo, but beside her, shoulder to shoulder. "Use her name," he said. Rizzo laughed. "Elena, then. Give me the ledger Marco found this afternoon, and she walks away." Dominic's eyes narrowed. "What ledger?" Rizzo's smile disappeared. That was the mistake. Elena noticed it first. "He thinks you found something," she whispered. Dominic looked at her. Elena's gaze dropped to the recipe box. "My mother didn't hide only a tape." Before anyone could stop her, she stepped forward. "The bottom." Rizzo frowned. Elena remembered sanding that box as a child and her mother telling her never to pry at the loose wooden panel beneath the recipes. She had thought it was broken. Now she understood. "There's a false bottom." Rizzo grabbed the box. Elena lunged at the same moment, knocking it from his hands. Recipes scattered across the concrete floor. The bottom panel cracked open. A thin black notebook slid out. Rizzo reached for it, but Dominic kicked it backward toward Elena. "Take it!" Everything erupted. Rizzo's men appeared from behind stacked crates as Marco's team entered from both sides. Dominic pulled Elena behind a steel support column while shouts echoed through the warehouse. No wild gunfire, no chaos without purpose, just seconds of terrifying movement before Marco's men controlled the exits. Elena opened the notebook with shaking hands. Names, dates, hospital payments, Moretti accounts. Then she saw one signature repeated again and again. Dominic. He looked down. His face changed. That's my uncle. Antonio Moretti, his father's most trusted advisor, the man who had stood beside Dominic at Daniel's funeral. Rizzo laughed from across the warehouse. Your own family killed your brother, Moretti. Ruth Brooks saw the medication switch. Your father paid her to disappear because exposing Antonio would have started a war. My mother refused the money, Elena said, understanding the records at last, so she redirected it to sick families. Rizzo's smile twisted, and kept the evidence anyway. He suddenly pulled a small lighter from his pocket and reached for the cassette. Elena moved before Dominic could stop her. She swept the cassette off the table and pressed it against her chest. Rizzo grabbed her wrist. Dominic crossed the distance instantly, but Elena didn't freeze. She drove her elbow into Rizzo's arm, broke his grip, and stepped back toward Dominic. Marco restrained Rizzo seconds later. Dominic took Elena's wrist carefully, checking where Rizzo had grabbed her. Are you hurt? No. She was breathing hard but standing. And I have this. She held up the cassette. Dominic looked at her, not like someone fragile he had rescued, but like someone who had just helped save the truth his family had buried for 14 years. Then a sharp sound came from behind them. Dominic's expression changed. He shoved Elena aside as Antonio Moretti stepped from the shadows with a gun raised. The shot cracked through the warehouse. Dominic staggered. Dominic! Elena caught him before he hit the floor, blood spreading across his shoulder. Antonio raised the weapon again. Elena dropped to her knees beside Dominic, refusing to run. Marco aimed from across the room, but Antonio pressed the barrel toward Elena. Give me the tape. Elena looked at Dominic, then at the man who had destroyed both their families. Slowly, she stood in front of the wounded Mafia boss. No, she said. My mother spent 14 years refusing to be afraid of you. I'm not starting tonight. Antonio's finger tightened around the trigger, but Elena did not move. She stood between him and Dominic with the cassette pressed against her chest, her curvy frame trembling but upright beneath the warehouse lights. Elena, Dominic said through clenched teeth, one hand pressed against his wounded shoulder. Move. She glanced back at him. You told me protection doesn't mean taking away someone's choice. Even hurt. Dominic understood. He stopped ordering her. Antonio gave a bitter laugh. Your mother made the same mistake. She thought courage could protect her. Elena faced him again. No, she knew fear shouldn't decide what kind of person she became. Antonio raised the gun higher. Last chance. Then Dominic noticed something Elena couldn't see, Marco moving along the edge of the warehouse behind Antonio. Dominic kept his eyes fixed on Elena and slowly lowered his voice. Trust me. Elena did. She dropped to the floor. Marco struck Antonio's arm aside at the same instant. The gun clattered across the concrete, and two of Dominic's men restrained him before he could reach it again. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Elena turned and rushed to Dominic. You're bleeding. I noticed. This isn't funny. I'm trying something new. Despite everything, Elena laughed once through the tears gathering in her eyes. Dominic's expression softened. His good hand reached toward her face, then stopped just short, waiting. Elena closed the distance herself. His palm rested gently against her cheek. You stood in front of a gun for me, he murmured. Don't ever do that again. You did it first. I'm professionally unreasonable. So am I, apparently. Marco called for the waiting medic while Elena stayed beside Dominic. The bullet had passed through the upper part of his shoulder, painful but not life-threatening. By sunrise, Antonio was in custody of men Dominic trusted. Rizzo's operation had collapsed, and copies of Ruth Brooks's notebook and cassette had been secured in 3 separate locations. The recording finally revealed the truth. Ruth had witnessed Antonio paying a hospital employee to alter Daniel Moretti's medication after Daniel discovered Antonio had been stealing from the family. Dominic's father had tried to hide Ruth and protect her, but he had also buried the truth to prevent a violent war inside the Moretti organization. Ruth refused to be silenced. She kept the evidence because she believed one day Dominic would be strong enough to confront the truth without becoming like the men who created it. When Dominic heard her voice on the recording, he said nothing for a long time. Elena sat beside him in the private hospital room, morning light spilling across the white sheets. "She remembered you," Elena whispered. Dominic looked at her. "Your mother saved me twice, once at the diner, and once by leaving you the truth." Elena lowered her eyes, overwhelmed. Dominic reached for her hand. "Look at me." She did. "For years, people made you believe surviving quietly meant you were weak." His thumb moved slowly across her knuckles. "They were wrong," Elena swallowed. "You barely know me. I know you worked double shifts for your father, right? I know you defended your mother when evidence made her look guilty. I know you walked into danger because you refused to let someone else carry your burden. And I know you can make edible food, which already puts you ahead of 12 expensive chefs." She laughed, and Dominic smiled with her. 3 weeks later, Elena entered Dominic's penthouse kitchen for her first official evening as his private chef, not because he had rescued her. Dominic had quietly arranged for the illegal debt against her father to be investigated and erased, but Elena insisted on signing a real employment contract and choosing her own schedule. Dominic agreed without argument. Mostly. When she arrived, she discovered he had preserved the small handwritten menu from Brooks' family kitchen and framed it beside the kitchen door. Elena stared at it, speechless. "Too much?" he asked. "For a mafia boss, you ask that surprisingly often." "Only with you." Months passed. Dominic's home slowly changed. Meals were no longer silent rituals at the end of empty days. Sometimes Elena cooked. Sometimes Dominic attempted to help and was banned from touching her knives. Her father recovered enough to visit for Sunday dinners. Marco stopped pretending he wasn't emotionally invested in dessert. And Elena stopped entering expensive rooms as if she needed permission to take up space. The moment that changed everything came at a charity dinner Dominic hosted for families struggling with medical expenses, a foundation created in Ruth Brooks's name. Elena wore a deep emerald dress she had chosen because she loved it, not because someone told her it made her look smaller. When whispers started among a few wealthy guests, Dominic crossed the ballroom and offered Elena his hand in front of everyone. "Dance with me." She looked around. "People are watching." "Good." "Dominic." He stepped closer. "I spent most of my life surrounded by people who wanted my power. You were the first person who cared whether I ate dinner." Her eyes filled. "That's not exactly a declaration. I'm getting there." He took a breath, something more difficult for him than facing any rival. "I don't want you smaller, quieter, easier, or different. I want you exactly as you walked into my life." Elena smiled through her tears and placed her hand in his. Under warm, golden lights, the lonely mafia boss and the waitress everyone had underestimated moved together across the ballroom, no longer protector and protected, but two wounded people who had chosen trust over fear. Dominic finally found something no chef could give him, a reason to come home. And Elena finally understood she had never been difficult to love. She had simply spent too many years around people who failed to recognize her worth. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks becomes the one person who changes everything. So tell me, would you have trusted Dominic after discovering his family's connection to Elena's past? And if this story moved you, subscribe to the channel for more powerful Mafia Boss stories about courage, healing, and the kind of love that sees what the rest of the world ignores.